Hey Liam, how's it going?
Wonderful. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm excited. This is our newest feature in the Empowering Facebook Groups um, platform called Office Hours. So you hold the distinction of being our very first uh, guest, our expert, actually, I should say.
Guestbert? Guestbert? Well,
Guest
Guestbert.
expert. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. We're making up terms as we go along. So, I'm Latanya LT, and I my day job is directing first year experience at UCLA, and have the distinct pleasure of being the founder and one of the admins for the Empowering First Gen Facebook group. And that group has grown so much, especially this year in particular, where I think we're approaching 5,500 people. So yay to everyone, students, undergrads, grads, faculty, staff, and just concerned folks. So thank you for being an active member, and thank you for your willingness to talk about this really important topic about how to navigate financial aid. So why don't we start with you telling a little bit about yourself and why are you passionate about this topic?
Hey, everyone in the virtual world. My name's Liam Danaher, and I'm zooming in here from Colchester, Vermont, which is just outside of Burlington. So like 10 minutes from UVM. For most folks who kind of have a Vermont landmark, we've got Ben and Jerry's, Bernie Sanders,
Oh, awesome.
good skiing, some good people. Yeah. So I guess my background is, I'm a proud first generation graduate. My sister and I were both able to go on to undergraduate study, but we were first in our family to get degrees. And so obviously I have a natural affinity and kinship for the first generation student experience, because chapters in that book are chapters in my own book.
I love that, Liam.
Thanks. Thank you. The passion for that. I was fortunate to have two really wonderful parents who wanted great things for my sister and I, and were incredibly hardworking. And we didn't have everything that we ever could have possibly wanted, but we had good structure and good support in my life. So I feel very fortunate and an incredibly privileged life. And my work with this field stems from, I think, all the great mentors and folks who took an kinship or interest in me. I am a graduate and a product of the TRIO programs myself.
Yay! Woo, Trio works.
Yeah, TRIO works. TRIO works in my life. My mom works for TRIO now as an outreach specialist, and I myself am a product of the talent search program. So I started working with a counselor in seventh grade to sort of identify some interest and some aptitudes and get on a college campus and sort of start building that. You got to see it before you can manifest it. So sort of start building that confidence and that belief in myself. I did my bachelor's degree at St. Michael's College, which is a small liberal arts school just outside of Burlington, Vermont. I was about 2,000 students at the time. I studied political science and American studies there. So I love politics, and I'm fascinated by history, and I'm really interested in the exchange of power and
Oh,
ideas.
that's a great moment, right? An interesting moment.
Yeah, it's a wild time to be along for the ride. 2020 has been quite the year. Yeah, that's for sure. Especially the exchange. But I would say when I graduated in 2009, like many folks who recently graduated during our pandemic,
Yeah.
the really interesting time to graduate. It was peak recession before the COVID recession. And being a first gen, my mom was a single parent at the time. Being a first gen grad, I had student loans. I needed a
Yeah.
job. And I had some friends who were going to find themselves and wanted to go backpacking and skiing, and much love to them for that. But conversations I had in my house were like, when does work start? Like tomorrow, because bills had to get paid. Was very fortunate to be my mom had been working in an administrative capacity in a TRIO office at a college at that point, and her boss, this is just how the world works in some ways. I had left a positive impression with her boss over the years, and that person saw an email for an open position and said, "This sounds like Liam."
Oh my gosh.
Passed that on to her, to my mom, who passed it on to me, and that was 10 years ago. and I got hired on a grant that no longer exists, but it's called the College Access Challenge Grant. So I was sort of a
Okay.
traveling speaker in rural communities throughout the state of Vermont to talk about higher education.
Mm.
And then the organization I work for, I've been there for 10 years now. I'm in my 10th, going on my 11th year, which super, super rare, I think, in the modern world, especially of like my contemporaries. Not a lot of folks have had the ability to stay for 10 years or chose to stay.
Exactly.
But I found great work, meaning-driven work for an organization that takes good care of its people. And so I work for the Vermont Student Assistance Corporation, which is a public nonprofit that the legislature in Vermont created in 1965. We don't have a lot of peer organizations nationally. There's not a lot of, it's called VSAC in Vermont. You ask a Vermonter what VSAC is. So usually we're out there working with folks, helping people try to pursue their dreams. It's a mission-driven nonprofit. So I always tell students, like, if you can find something that you believe in that enables you to live your life in a way that you feel good about, chase that.
That's awesome.
Long story short, sorry,
No, this is perfect.
VSAC is, we host education grants as well. So traditionally been a nonprofit lender. We've hosted a federal student loan program, but we also have a private student loan program, and we also have grant programs. So VSAC is the state's financial aid agency.
Mm-hmm.
So we administer our state grant program. Not every state has need-based financial aid grants, but Vermont does. So we administer that program for the state, which doles out close to $20 million a year in need-based financial aid to students studying post-secondary of any kind, whether that's non-degree, like imagine commercial driver's license, welding certificate, so like job skill training, part-time grants and full-time grants, all based on need. And then we also have a series of counselors who work in the TRIO programs. We host TRIO grants and the Gear Up grant. So Gear Up and TRIO are kind of like siblings. I get to work alongside now my TRIO counselor, which is great. We're colleagues now. And I work in 4 schools in Vermont, and I also work on our retention program with first-year students. So we host about 3,000 students across the state in various outreach programs. And then when they all hopefully go on to do something that means something to them, whether that's college in a traditional sense or job training or whatever that might look like, we try to help them navigate the financial pathway to that, sort of to and through college, if you will. So
are most of your students remote right now, or are they in person?
It's a great question. So Vermont, until this week, we've had incredible leadership on a local and state level in Vermont. So we've been very fortunate too, I would imagine, for a handful of reasons, that we haven't had the same shutdown experience that some other areas have had.
Like California?
Yes, definitely a different experience. And Vermont, 600,000 people in the whole state, right? Our largest city has got 100,000 people.
Oh, wow.
In the greater metropolitan area.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So UVM has 10,000 students, and that's one of the biggest cities in Vermont, the college itself. So like it's size and scope is obviously a factor. There's probably streets in most major American cities that have more people than our largest city. So that's sort of, people are more spread out, and that's just an interesting nuance to this whole ordeal. And I'd say good steady leadership has been helpful at the state level for us. And
good.
So we've experienced some shutdown. Most of our public schools presently, some are still in person full time, with like proper precautions in place. And then all 4 of the schools I serve in, most schools in Vermont, are they split grades in half, split the school in half, 2 days on, 1 day clean and remote, and 2 days on. So students switch. So in person 2 days a week, virtual 3 days a week.
Yeah, so it's good they get a mix of experience.
Yeah, I think there's been some elements of COVID that have been humbling and challenging for all of us, and there's some interesting silver linings too, maybe. But yeah, I think students are really grateful to have it in person, and we even had fall sports in Vermont, which
wow,
many winter sports are going to continue, I think, but sometimes sports can be such an elevator socially and, financially and personally for students. I was a student and an athlete, and
wow,
I think the pressure I didn't play sport. I played rugby in college, but not competitively. But I mean, the pressure to get good grades, to be able to play sports.
That's right.
That social contagion around.
It goes together. Yeah.
Yeah, community is huge. So many students I know students I serve want and need that community. gladly in
Absolutely.
school and with their friends on their teams.
Yeah. Well, I remember you and I were chatting back and forth in the Facebook group about, I think it was in response to someone else's financial challenges, but I was saying how that was a big barrier for me in college. So number one, my mom my single parent lost income from the time that like right my freshman year. So that was an issue. And then I had mentioned how, you know, I was dismissed from a school for financial reasons and had a hard time trying to transfer or get access to my transcript. What are some of and it seems like that's not uncommon, right? But what are
Super
some of
common.
the common challenges you've observed in your role with students in financial aid?
It's a great question. Well, I think so. Part of my job is we have a 7th year, our Garrett program is a 7th year program called Guide, which we were one of the first programs in the country to launch. And I had a great boss and mentor who I was new to the profession, and she pulled me on that because I was a first gen grad. So I got to work on first gen retention. And so I get to serve students at 30 different schools a year who are in their first year. Something that we know to be true and preaching to the choir in some ways, but if you get a $50 hold on your account and your parents make $150,000 a year, that doesn't mean anything to you. If you get a $50 hold in your account and your parents' gross income is nothing, or a social security check, or disability, or they've lost their job,
That's
or
right.
puts food on the table,
Yep.
and anyone who's taken Psych 101, Maslow, you can't be thinking about
That's right.
college when you're trying to eat,
That's right.
So I think from like an equity and access standpoint for low income first gen folks, like the research bears this out, but they graduate at such a much lower level, not for lack of tenacity or grit or desire, but it's some of these institutional barriers.
That's right.
You know, and most students who eventually default on a student loan, which is, there's that shame and blame game for sure, because you feel like you've done something wrong. And
I'm having like the flutters of my stomach right now.
yeah, it's that anxiety, that
Yeah.
financial anxiety, because if you grow up in a space where money is taboo or stress, or it's a pain point, and then it just becomes this stressful pain point down the line. And exit loan counseling is really tough, for students who are graduating, dealing with all the social emotional transition, and they get out of school or they leave school without graduating, and they don't even get exit loan counseling. They don't know how much money they've borrowed. They don't know who owns that debt, who's servicing that debt.
Yeah.
They've got a mix of public loans, of private loans. They've got bills. They've got skip tracers calling them and sending nasty grams to them and blowing up their email. And they're going to have the whole mix of friends. Some friends are going to have no debt. Some friends are going to walk into jobs at their parents' companies. Some friends are going to go find themselves and travel. And then there's that mentality of, I've done something wrong here.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think the biggest hurdles, advocacy. And I can't speak to everyone's experience, but I do know that some of the students that I get to serve feel like pressure as seniors in high school to be going somewhere super, super flashy by any means necessary. And sometimes I think looking at school as like an investment, or what that investment might look for you 10, 12 years down the line, is also important. Money's not everything, but money can buy you time. And so
Mm,
I try to get students to think about reasonable debt load for themselves. And if they want to start their own company, they want to take a risk. We can't do that if you have $80,000 in debt and nobody to
mhm,
help you pay your bills.
mhm.
So, I just think financial literacy in general is tough. My mom, who's one of the hardest working people I know my whole life, but if nobody teaches you, nobody teaches you. And if you don't have the opportunity to learn that stuff, then it can get in your way. And if you can't pull your transcripts and you can't transfer, and then you've got bills that are attached to debt that isn't even serving you,
Right.
that literally just like holding you back. That's like exhausting, and it's like too common,
Yeah.
heartbreaking stuff.
Yeah. I see it from my end too, especially around the issue of student loans that you brought up. And I get it. I totally understand. Many folks, because they want to avoid debt, will really sometimes not even see student loans as an option at all, or certainly the last option. How do you advise students around that issue?
Great question. Um, Yeah, I'm not a classically trained fiduciary, right? So I'm not an accountant. I just have my own experience and my own perspective on debt. Debt is a tool. You know, you can build your world, you can build a prison. It depends on what you're building. And I look at debt when it comes to higher ed finance like a tool. It's almost inevitable that there's going to be some gap fund,
right? Yeah.
right? It's going to be part of that game. Direct student loans, federal student loans are a convenient tool. Like a lot of students I work with want a car, right? And I remember wanting a car, and I wanted a shiny car because
Not just any
nice
car.
stuff, you know. I wanted to have a car that I was like proud of. You know, you'd walk into the parking lot and be like, "Ooh, who's that car?" You know, like I remember that 16-year-old feeling, not like, "Oh, that's not my car." You know, I don't want to be in that car.
Walk past it.
Yeah, not mine. I'm gonna walk. So like talking about like college loan versus an auto loan, like if you couldn't go to a dealership at 18 with no cosigner and no credit and ask for $5,500 with deferred payments for 4 years at 2.5% interest, right? You can't do that.
Right.
Most car dealerships will give you like 1 month off of payments, just long enough so you can't return it. And then they'll hit you 60 days later with that first payment. And so school loans have benefit, right? Like students, like one of the schools I work in serves a lot of folks who are new to the United States, and new Americans are getting on their feet and moving their life forward. And so like that's a unique conversation to have about like, what does debt look like? How can I use debt effectively and intelligently? Is debt like is it a cultural issue or a faith-based or religious perspective on debt in the family? And how does that conversation unfold? So like try to be really thoughtful about loans and like what that could mean. But I really like when I work with students, I want them to understand that it's a tool. If you're borrowing, I think, you know, you got to find your own magic number, right? So you can access $5,500 through the direct student lending program as a dependent student your first year. And the college gives you, say, a merit-based scholarship of $10,000. And then SAC, where I work, might give you $3,000 in need-based aid, and then you might get $3,000 more in Pell Grant. What's the gap at the top? Because that's always going to be finessed with almost always finessed with loans. Because most folks don't have 10 grand. And if COVID has taught us many things, one of them is most people are like a couple paychecks away from catastrophe.
That's right. Yeah.
So, you know, and I've done 1,000 FAFSAs in 10 years. There's a line on there that says, what do you have in checking, savings, and cash? And it's rarely thousands and thousands of dollars. Like people are doing the very best they can, paycheck to paycheck. So
getting by.
Yeah. So if you don't have that savings and you don't have that income, you're going to be borrowing that money. So if you're borrowing $5,000 to start, if the school is asking you to borrow another $20,000, really what they're asking you to do is borrow $25,000, which makes that $100,000 endeavor. You're going to do it in 4 years, which all students don't even average a 4-year, always average 4-year completion rate. Like especially students who are working part-time, helping out at home, which is the first generation narrative. Like if you get out in 5, you've done something awesome.
Yeah, right, exactly.
If you get out at all, you know, if you graduate at all. So like trying to have a really robust conversation around what's this debt load times 4? Best case scenario, what's the, you know, then let's go on and let's look at jobs that you're talking about. Like I don't ever want to be a dream killer with students. So like you want to be a teacher, or you want to be a nurse, or you want like what's the salary for that job in the city that you actually want to live with. Let's assume everything goes well, and then if those numbers make sense, we can do a loan calculator and think, okay, $30,000 in debt, $300 a month payment for 10 years. I can actually swing that on a $55,000 a year salary. But if the student is looking at $1,100 a month for a loan payment, like what if they're walking into a real bee's nest?
Yeah.
So for me, I get the luxury of not working at an institution. I work for like I always tell students, like, I am not a salesman. The thing I want you to do is borrow an amount of money that allow you to live the life that you deserve to live. You know, but I don't have I'm not an admissions counselor, so I don't have that pressure of crafting a class, which I know is a real complex challenge. And I don't know if I've even answered the question.
You did. And you're actually starting to answer the next question, but I'll ask it more directly. Earlier, you talked about the importance of advocacy. Can you just talk about that a little bit more? Like, what did you mean by that?
Well, I mean, advocacy on the individual level. I mean, when I was at UVM, I did my graduate work there in the Higher Education Student Affairs Administration program, and it was an awesome program. Many of the folks in my cohort were from all over the country and even the world. And one night we played idiom bingo, which is like you
Oh my
say,
God, I love it.
like your kind of your culture. And
Yeah,
so a saying in Vermont is "squeaky wheel gets the grease,"
that's
which
right.
not I don't know if that's a saying everywhere, but that's a Northeast saying.
Hmm.
But like, if you don't ask for it, you're never going to get it. Like, no one's going to bang down your door and give you money. But from student advocacy perspective, I counsel all of our students. We counsel all of our students going into their first year to appeal their financial aid award letters, like off the top, like appeal it and ask for more money. Always, they're not going to take money away from you. I think, especially first gen students. Sort of like how sometimes if you've ever bought a car, like the dealer somehow convinces you they're doing you a favor.
Uh-huh.
You're paying their rent, like so like sometimes students are afraid that they don't want to rock the boat. Like I got into this,
Yeah.
I got behind the ivory walls, or I'm almost there. I don't want to
Uh-huh.
upset anybody and ask.
Uh-huh.
It's like no, 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 no. They
Uh-huh.
need you. No students, no school. They need you. Can the school afford you? Is usually like versus like
Wow, you're
can
just
you
dropping
afford
some
that school?
some truth bombs, Liam. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
You're kind. I'm lucky to be around a lot of great teachers, but we like to try to look at it like it's not a deficit paradigm. Can they afford you? It's not can you afford them? They're trying to get you. Can they afford you? And I'm a sports guy. I love sports, so I tell a lot of my students they're the talent. I'm their agent. I'm going to try
Mm,
to get them a good contract. And that's
mhm,
sort of a visual way to think about it. Like, is
mhm.
this the contract for you? Is this the deal for you? Like, you're going to earn X number of dollars in 10 years per year. This is the pathway to get there. Is this the way to get there?
Yeah.
So I think appealing award letters is a huge, huge thing. And something I know anecdotally in my own experience, but also with a lot of students too, is, in college officials would probably tell this too. It's not done once you get there, right? You can do better. You're like, for me personally, I did better my freshman year in college than I ever did in high school. And so on through my sophomore year, like I hit my stride in a way that I had never hit in high school.
Mhm.
And so my freshman year was the most expensive year for me. You can pursue merit-based financial aid once you're on campus.
Yeah, and like know the lay of the land and all that. Yeah.
Yeah, and getting involved with like your local TRIO programs, they have access to some resources. They can have
Yeah.
access to some resources from grant funding. So I think tapping into a community, and so that's sort of from an advocacy perspective. I try to get my students to feel comfortable with.
Mhm.
And then yeah, I like also like super specifically like tracking the academic calendar. So if the school, if just checking in with the financial aid or the bursar's office, is the financial aid, is there any increase in merit money available, right?
Mhm.
Beginning of the year at the mid-semester point, something we're tracking right now. The way all financial aid federally is and institutionally is operating right now. So seniors today, class of 2021, they're applying for enrollment in 2021, 2022 using tax information from 2019. Well,
Right.
there's a little bit of something happened in 2020 to many families,
That's
you know,
right.
and
Yeah.
in Vermont, you've got to just to even know that, like, why am I using taxes from most people get their taxes done. Maybe they get them done at community action or someone does them where they do TurboTax. They put it in a little folder, they get their direct deposit, and they try to think about it again because it's like stressful. The IRS is anxiety provoking. And
Mhm.
it's that
Mhm.
same thing. It's that money anxiety. So in Vermont, we have the luxury of where I work, we administer our grant program. So encouraging all of our students to reach out to the grant department at the Vermont Student Assistance Corporation and let them know that the 2019 tax information does not reflect a current financial reality in the home. Someone's lost a job, COVID has closed a business, whatever has happened, can we please use 2020 expected tax returns first? Many schools are honoring that.
Oh my
Many
God.
financial aid organizations are honoring that. So, folks have been hit by COVID. You got to advocate, you got to ask. And I think first gen students sometimes don't want to rock the boat, whether that's, personal or culture. It's also like a certain personality type. Like I've never sent food back at a restaurant. I've had some bad food before. It's not really in my nature either. I
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
understand it, but
Yeah. Yeah.
so I think, yeah, that's from an advocacy perspective. That's where we're coming from in our work.
I'm going to be quoting you many times, just so you know that. And
Right, good.
let me like recap some of the things you said because they're so important. I just want to make sure everyone got them. Like, I love how you flip this narrative about um, like you're the player and how can you get the most out of the situation? And you're absolutely right. many of us from first gen or working class backgrounds, et cetera, or immigrant backgrounds, sometimes feel like, we don't have a say in things. And I really appreciate you flipping that around. And another really important nugget is asking, like you said, do a financial aid appeal no matter what, because if the worst case scenario, you just had what you started with. Best case scenario, something else happens. But particularly in this time, asking an institution to consider your 2020 circumstances as opposed to the prior year. I love hearing that. And I want to hear more about, if we could talk a little bit more about the graduate student experience. And Liam, I think you and I can agree that that's very, very rarely discussed, about the differences between number one, applying to undergrad versus grad school, and then funding it as well. So I know sometimes I've heard first gen graduate students think that there's a common app like there is for grad school, like, oh, I want to apply to these 10 schools, and so I'm going to use the same application. Well, that's not true, because you're applying to a department and not just a school. What what can you say to folks who are going on to graduate school about financial aid? What's similar, and then what's different about that?
Well, the challenge is with graduate school, I think, even less folks have access to graduate school.
Right? Let's talk
So,
about that.
yeah, like, it's such a privilege, and it's becoming an increasingly a privilege for wealthy folks and folks who have more socioeconomic privilege in that way. So my own experience, like, I did not think about graduate school. In my end of undergrad, I was like exhausted and burnt out. And the only reason I went to graduate school was because I had a really wonderful boss, mentor more than anything. And she was first gen, and she had her doctorate in educational leadership, and she didn't mess around. But
Yeah.
like when I first got hired, one of the best things she did is she forced me to max out my retirement contribution. I was like 21 years old in a recession. I was like, I need all that money. And she's like, no, you don't. And so that, for one, is like a life-changing advice. And I give that to every new grad I get the opportunity to know. Like, if you have the ability to start saving at 21, start saving.
Do
Even if
it.
you think you can't. That's kind of a tangent, but like, that enabled us to try to purchase a home in an opportunity when we might not have been able to. So like stuff like that can be generationally transformative. And that was just a piece of advice that someone gave me. As far as grad school, I think, and I felt this myself when I graduated. There was so much. It's just like high school kids have pressure to go to a flashy school. Like, I had friends who were like going to work, had like great jobs lined up after undergrad, and we're going to go travel to Europe. Everyone's doing all these amazing things, and I was like, the keeping up with the Joneses pressure was real.
Mm.
And I didn't have anything lined up, like a job I thought I was going to get had fallen through. My family ran a small construction company. I had bills, so I was general labor. And then, being a first gen kid from a rural background, my nickname on the construction site was College Boy.
Oh my gosh,
They
Liam.
resented me because somehow my choice to go to school was somehow an indictment of them, which it never was. I loved that job. I loved those people. It was great. It was a wonderful experience. We built houses in predominantly roofing, and I got my first job 7 months after that. So it took 7 months to get my feet in the professional world. 7 months of being college boy.
Oh, you're giving me all the feels, Liam.
I think about that person all the time, that experience, and it was invaluable. I think about it often. And I had a lot of friends who rushed into undergraduate school because they were afraid not to have an answer for the "what are you doing after graduation" question. And so what that looks like for a lot of students, especially students from a low income working class background, is more loans.
That's right.
And it's like loans at a high interest rate.
Yeah, really big loans.
Huge loans, like $50,000 a year, right?
That's right.
Let's just, you're going to leave under the national average for debt is $30,000, and you're going to do a 2-year program at 50 grand a year and pile another $100,000 on top of that. So you'll be at 175 by the time you're 30. It's okay to go do something. Like, after undergrad, that construction gig, and then I worked in a restaurant and bar as a bouncer and help sling pizza on the weekend. And I remember the way people would come to town for my own college and the way they would look at me in that setting. And I remember the classism, like, I remember how that felt. But I'm really, really glad that I didn't take that and rush into debt because of it. I remember, can be tough to feel like you're not moving at the pace you're supposed to be moving, but that doesn't mean you should rush to the easiest opportunity either, which can be debt sometimes. It's okay to do nothing for a year. Also, I'd say it's
Mhm.
okay to go at a restaurant for a year. There's nothing wrong with that. People live great lives. Like there's dignity to
Yeah.
every type of work. Like it's not like it's not like you're settling. Take a breath. Take a breath after undergrad. If you
Mhm.
can find work in your field, that
Mhm.
would be advice I would give. I mean, not everyone's on that pathway, and some people are direct and it's linear, and that's great. I mean, that works for them, but it doesn't have to be that way. I and so from my own experience, I found a job that I like. I always talk to students, especially younger students, about workplace values. So, like, what matters to an employer? What are benefits, right? So, students from working class backgrounds don't even always understand what benefits are, right?
Mm.
Like,
Oh my God.
free time. How about tuition remission? How about an employer who invests in you? Okay. So whether that's Starbucks or McDonald's, or whether that's a nonprofit, or whether that's working for a school district, right? And find someone who invests in you, some professional development. I was really in my imposter syndrome
Mm.
before graduate school. So I took one class at UVM in the continuing ed program. I was like, I'm not graduate school material. I'm not smart enough for this. And I didn't want to apply because the application, like personal statement and visit days, and like all the intensity around that really overwhelmed me. And my imposter syndrome was like, this is not for you. This is for other people. Um, anyway, my employer was, one of they partially funded graduate programs, which is an enormous privilege. I'm not suggesting that everyone has access to that, but we went almost 50-50 on the cost. And so I would say my own experience, it took me 4 years to do a 2-year program, but I don't carry any debt from that.
Mm.
That's a paid degree, and so 4 years is not glamorous, but no debt is glamorous. So like define
Right.
glamour,
Right.
divine
Right.
utility. So like, and I had many contemporaries in my program who worked their butts off in assistantships on campus. So not every assistantships are, unfortunately, some of the first things that get cut at schools.
That's right.
But like the work studies get cut, which they'll serve and sustain some of the most financially marginalized people. So it's a whole other issue. But looking at programs where you could conceivably do it part-time, I think is a
Mhm.
strategy worth entertaining. Getting a job, like an entry-level job in the field, and then work in the city of the program you want to be in, and then take a class
Wow.
or two at a time. It's just a thought. It's like a
Yeah.
way to do it. It might take you 3 years to do a 2-year program, but I worked with an advisor at the University of Vermont to do my HESA program over 4 years, and that was doable. It wasn't always super fun. And like, yeah, I definitely had some serious FOMO after 3 years when I watched the other classes graduate. And I was like, I can't believe I got to go back for 2 classes. But
You're
I'm so
done now,
grateful.
though.
Yeah. And you have
Yeah.
it forever. So if you were to ask me, like, would I trade those 2 years for debt? No way. Like, no way. So debt being a tool, I'm glad. So that'd be, I guess, some advice. Think really creatively. Can you start part-time? Can you
Mhm.
do a continuing or distance learning program? Can you roll some credits in?
Mm. Mhm.
Um, can you get, like, is there a non, like, if you want to get a graduate degree in psychology, is there a social service agency in the town that you want to go to school in? Are they hiring? Can your bachelor's degree get you a job there? Will they help pay for your degree? Possibly,
Yeah.
probably,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
right? So you can get out of your grad, and if you're doing that and paying off your undergraduate loans while you're increasing your future earning potential, I think that could be a really strong pathway. Not
Yeah.
the only pathway, and not everyone has that luxury. I understand that, but
There's so many nuggets. I love your framework centers around like possibilities and options, right? And that there's not just one set way to do something. I think that can be really affirming for folks. And the other thing I do want to say to people as well is still complete the FAFSA, right? There's some
oh,
components
oh,
of the experience that are similar. So you want to do the FAFSA, but also when you're looking at graduate in professional school programs, you're applying for a department and not just a school. So I would also tell people to make sure, just like Liam had talked earlier about going to the financial aid office and asking for appeal, is talking to your department and seeing what different financial aid options are. What did you say? The squeaky wheel gets the
Greece.
grease, or closed mouths don't get fed.
Mm,
Same
yeah,
same concept, right? Is letting people know. And I definitely understand, like, you don't want people in your business, so to speak, but there's no way there's some opportunities you just don't know about. You could do all the searching on a website, and a lot of that information is not on the website. So make sure you talk to your individual department, not just the school you're applying to, your department about your situation and see what they offer. Well,
I think also like sometimes fellowships or like other
mhm,
larger scholarship, like air scholarship programs, some of the trio resources that can be available and assistantships on campus. So like, can you work on campus? Um, it can be other ways to at least defray the cost, you know,
yeah.
or if like, okay, you want to get a graduate degree from, UCLA. They
Mhm,
hiring at admissions at UCLA.
mhm.
They need a road warrior. Like, can you go to a few high schools? Can you do that? Like, you get this incredible institutional experience. You get a
Mhm,
paycheck, you get a job, you get some benefits. Do they offer tuition remission to employees? So can
mhm.
you take some classes even at a discounted rate? Many schools will offer that. And yeah, filling out anytime you don't fill out the FAFSA, even if it feels like you said, like people into your business, it's your financial world. The FAFSA is an application for financial aid. If you don't fill out the FAFSA, you're going to cut a check. That's what you're telling the institution. I'm going to cut a check, which you don't need to do.
You don't need
No
to
one's
do that.
doing.
Yeah,
You don't need to do that.
yeah. The other thing, like some of the language changes too from undergrad to grad. Oftentimes I hear people ask, what are scholarships available for grad and graduate professional school? There aren't as many scholarships as, like Liam, you just said, fellowships, which can be similar, but not necessarily the same. So knowing the different language, knowing that sometimes working for the institution, whether you're doing research for it or you're teaching or something, not only will it give you money, but then it also gives you work experience too. So you could put those things on your resume. That's pretty different from undergrad. Well, in a few minutes we have left, I just want to turn this back over to you and see if there's um, any, I don't want to say closing thoughts because I feel like we're opening a door more than we're shutting one off, but something you want to leave the folks with, no matter how you want to approach it, something that's really burning in your gut, something you wish you had known, or just anything at all. Just want to give you an opportunity.
Well, it's a pleasure to make community with you across the country, and I really appreciate this group, and I appreciate all the individual folks who make it a community. I mean the first gen experience is my own, but it's many of ours, and I am really flattered to be part of this. Closing remarks. I mean, I think the best way to look at when I work with students on the first gen side, I work in the access world, right? So I work in the retention world. So I'm predominantly in the access world. Higher education is the numbers can feel out of this world and the experience can feel overwhelming, but it's the best and surest way to bet on yourself. To bet on yourself for success. And understanding the money is a really effective way to get there. So
Hmm.
financial literacy Financial literacy is a moving target. I'm not done. There's things I need to work on, and my financial discipline doesn't always mirror my financial literacy, right? Like,
Oh my gosh.
I bought an air fryer on Friday. I panic bought an air fryer at Costco. So, I believe me, like nobody is perfect. You don't got to be perfect. But I think like betting on yourself is a good thing, and then accessing your community and your resources and your people and the people who've done well. Not sometimes this is sometimes not taking everybody's advice either is important. That one person who had a terrible experience at UCLA or UNLV, because that doesn't mean it's a terrible school, right?
Right.
Like you're not, so I think just like getting a broad sense of the people in your community, listening and asking a lot of questions, not being afraid to ask questions.
Hmm.
And I think betting on yourself is a good thing. I'm proud to be first gen. I think maybe there was a time where like that was a deficit, but I don't see it that way now. Strong steels are forged in hot fires, and it's good. It's good to be first gen. I'm proud to be it, and I hope all my students are too. So if there's anything I could leave with that, at promise. That's how I feel about it. So
Uh, we have to end on that mic drop. Don't go. I'm going to close out here, but you stick around for a second. Liam, thank you again. This was just an amazing way to kick off. Like I said, this new segment in the group. I really see it as a community, just as you described. And there are so many experts in that role, and it's certainly not me. I feel honored to bring folks together, but I recognize there's folks who have so many experiences to share with the group. And that's one of the reasons why people say they join these days, is that they want to give back. So we created office hours to host that opportunity. And so I'll be sure to send this out when it's ready to go. And I want to thank you again for being our first guest. And thanks to those who were listening today.